Hey, welcome to Wing Talk. This is Steve. This is going to be a fun show today. We are going to be talking about motors. We're talking about KO Motors. Hopefully we'll have the guy from KO Motor, Chris, show up at some point here. If not, we will discuss it among the panel here. And we have a very special guest, a longtime member of the INAV Fixed Wing Group, someone who has a lot of passion for INAV, and we've been trying to get him on the show for about the last half year. Schedules haven't always worked out, but today we do have Lloyd with us, so we'll be talking to Lloyd Southam, right? Southam. In a minute or two here, but first I got to introduce people. Number one, I would like to mention that we unfortunately are going to be missing one panelist today, and that is Darren Lyons. Unfortunately, he has contracted COVID-19 and is, well, he's really battling with it, but he's at home and he's doing well. I mean, some days are better than others, but he's still in the throes of it, and he's not looking his personal best, and he's not feeling his personal best, but he is in the chat, so be sure to say hi to Darren if you're in the chat as well. We wish him Godspeed in getting full recovery, and we look forward to having him back next month. And we, as always, we do have Mark Hoffman. Mark, how are you doing today?
Yeah, I'm good, thanks, and I hope we will have a good show even with the smaller round today.
Okay, get more of the good stuff going on today. You are vaccinated, right, Mark?
Yes, I'm fully vaccinated, but that still doesn't mean I can't get it. So yeah, we will see. Till now, I was lucky.
Yeah, I think it kind of gets around to everybody, unfortunately. Hey, and with us today is our favorite rock star. It is Luke. Luke, how you doing, man?
Yeah, I'm good. Hopefully Darren's doing okay, and we'll see him here next month.
Yeah, it sounds cool. Hey, I want to let you know, I mean, because you are like, you're away with ladies. You know, I've kind of noticed that about you. You're our chick magnet for the show.
I see.
But so I just want to let you know that I have my way with ladies too. This actually did happen. I'm flying out in Long Beach a couple weeks ago with Rich, and this lady walks up with her dog. Now, the thing about Long Beach is that some of these homes near the coast, I looked them up. The cheapest home is about $3.5 million. And so this lady that I'm imagining is probably somebody whose husband died. She was probably was the trophy wife and now without a husband. And she starts talking to me and she's asking about the planes. And I'm like, oh yeah, we're like flying them. And I'm talking to her for a little while and she's like, and like, Luke, I'm ready to like take my 82 planes and move in with the woman. I mean, this is just fantastic. And then I just want to let you know how smooth I am. She said, I tried to get into this whole RC thing when I was a kid. And I go, oh, really? She said, yeah. That's why I learned that the foam melts when you try to glue it. And I said, that's styrofoam. We haven't used styrofoam from RC planes for a really long time.
Sounds like you're really in there, Steve.
She wished me a good day and walked away. That's it. But there's somebody who is also in the ladies. Listen, I don't want to put competition on you, but there's a guy here as our guest today, Lloyd, and Lloyd has a very beautiful wife, and it's in his profile picture. So, special lady, and I'm sure we want to hear all about her as well. But Lloyd, how are you doing today?
Yeah, I'm good, thank you. Yeah.
You're doing good, man. So yeah, you are. What part of the UK are you located in?
I'm from Redditch, it's by Birmingham in West Midlands.
West Midlands?
West Midlands, yeah.
West Midlands. Okay, so these guys, just so we know, we get bearings, because both Darren and Luke live in south, kind of close to London, right?
I'm in the middle, centre.
Yeah, we're just below London, about 30 miles below London. So.
So you're in the southernmost point of UK.
Not quite, but certainly a bit more south than Lloyd.
Okay, he's a couple hours away.
Yeah, about that. Yeah.
Okay, well, that's cool. Fantastic. So, Lloyd, as I understand, you are, besides being a wing guy, you are also a mechanic. So it's always interesting to hear how people kind of start in. What?
Just finished my training. I'm now working as an auto locksmith. I was a fabricator. Yeah, I was a fabricator for years before that. Yeah, I'm a fully trained mechanic. I've literally worked my way through the whole motor trade. And I've settled on auto locksmith.
Okay.
So years. Good job as well. So different every day. Your hands stay clean.
So you were a metal fabricator before?
Yeah.
Okay. And that's, but you also can work on engines, and you worked your way through the whole car?
Yeah, pretty much anything on a car, whether it's from the engine to painting it, to the locks, to, yeah, you name it, there's no job I can't do on a car.
Oh, and then you worked on classic cars?
Yes. Yeah, I was restoring those for a number of years. Probably been doing that for the last 6 years up until my career changed just.
So what kind of, just out of curiosity, what kind of classic cars do you have there over the UK?
Austins, old Fords mainly, like the Capris, old Mark 1 Escorts. Anything older than that's generally been restored and locked away in dry storage, so you don't really get to work on much older than that. Done a few pre-war cars. So, go on, sorry.
Oh yeah, that's cool. I mean, so you worked on Fords. Like I had an old Mustang at one point, 65 Mustang.
Yeah, we've got a few Mustangs in the UK, but not many.
Yeah.
We've got the UK version, the Capri.
It's the Capri in the UK?
Yeah, it's worth some money now. They're about 30 grand.
Okay. So your experience coming into RC, how did you get into, I mean, like, what was your first plane?
My first plane was a 1600mm glider, Thunder Tiger E-Hawk, if you've seen one. Yeah, my first ever experience with a camera on a plane, I actually taped a phone to the wing and sent it. Got some pretty good down shots to the ground, and then after that, I got into FPV. I had an E-Flight Mystique. It's a 2.9 meter span. I've stuck an Artbird flight controller in there, and I got a Run Camp 2, and just an immersion RC VTX, and riding thermals all day with it. It's brilliant.
2.9 meter. That's a huge plane.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a balsa wing, fiberglass body.
Oh, did it have a rudder? Or was this a rudder and elevator?
With the flaps, pro brakes, the lot. I took it up from 100 meters to 1,100 meters in 40 minutes without touching the throttle once. Just riding thermals all the way up.
That is a very high climb rate for thermaling.
At one point, I've got about 20-degree nose down, and I'm doing about 3 meters a second vertical speed. Yeah.
Damn.
With a 20-degree nose down, just straight up like an elevator.
Where was that? Was that over like a particularly thermally active site, or just
over my town? The site I was flying, we've got a big strip of factories up the one side, and then I'm flying. So you've got a good mix of hot and cold on the ground.
Okay, interesting.
Yeah, it's brilliant.
Yeah, sounds like a great time.
How long ago was this when you first got started?
Well, that was 3 years ago yesterday, because the memory come up on my Facebook. Yeah. My INAV, I started INAV in November 2019 with an AR Pro. That was my first INAV plane.
Oh, really? That must have been November 2019. Was the plane out at that time? I thought it was 2020.
Literally pre-order, yeah.
Oh, okay, yeah.
Wasn't the release 2020?
I thought it was 2020. The release.
Yeah, I think it was end of 2020, November or so.
I had it in November 2019. Yeah, just have a look back through INAV, fixed wing group. All the photos have been up on there, I'm sure, from the build. But yeah,
we can have a look later.
Pre-order. Yeah, I had it pre-order. So I had it a little bit earlier.
Cool. Yeah. So that was your first INAV plane, and then you got what? How'd you set that up? It was just default to everything.
Yeah, I had John Pickles. You probably know him on here. He helped me set it up, walked me through it, double checked all my settings at the field, and threw it for me on its first maiden. So yeah.
That's cool. That's a hard plane to launch.
17 builds since then.
Okay. Yeah. Check it out. And so, what kind of flight controllers are you putting in these planes?
Maytech, F4, F5 WSC mainly.
of the WSs. Yeah, that's actually a pretty decent board. Of all the new ones now, that seems to be the pretty solid.
I like the breakout board because you're not restricted on where you can put the flight controller, so you can always get access to plug it in really easy.
Yeah.
Trying to try and get a USB in there.
Yeah, it's kind of that's all the new Maytag boards that are wing oriented have those breakout boards, and they're really it's convenient.
Good move that they make there.
Okay.
Yeah, so currently I also have some Maytag boards laying around, an F45 wing and an F765 wing, but I don't want to put it in anything just because it doesn't have the breakout board. It just makes access so much harder. But yeah, I will see if I get some future projects to put them into.
Okay, cool. So with the so you started off with the AR Pro, and how high did you get that one up to?
Don't really want to say on here.
No.
I've seen someone take it up
400 feet.
I've seen someone take it up to 22,800.
Jeez.
On 399 feet above the top of a mountain, right?
Yeah, well, it weren't me flying. It weren't my plane, that one. But yeah, I've seen what one can do.
I mean, that's pretty impressive. I mean, the AR Pro is actually very efficient when it comes to level flight and endurance and distance. But for climb, it feels like it needs a lot of power, at least with the stock powertrain. Maybe with another motor, lower KV, bigger prop, it will be more efficient for climbing.
Yeah, that was with a Brother Hobby 2810, 1500 kV and a Samba 6 ABC. So it does better at higher altitudes because you got more RPMs and a bit more pitch.
Yeah. Sounds good.
With an 8x5, I was struggling to get past 18.
Was that 4S?
Yeah, lithium ion.
Yeah, fantastic. So you were able to get that up pretty high. I mean, that sounds like a nice. Which Brother Hobby was this again? 2015?
810, 1500 kV.
810, 1500 kV. Okay. Fantastic. So, what are the planes besides the AR Pro did you get into after that?
Dragon V1, Phoenix V2, AR Mini, AR 900. What else have I done? I've twin motored a Ranger 2400, but I've not have that yet. I have flew it twin, but it was with an Artbird. My Strix Goblin, Lidl gliders. I'll convert those. C1. C1 Chaser. There's a few that I've missed as well, I think.
How do you do your little glider conversions? I've done a couple of little gliders. One with Twistler-on wings.
Yeah. Oh no.
Oh okay. Oh wow. That's a bit more.
Got a 4S 1P lithium ion built in under the wing.
Are they all in line, or is that like
2 and 2? So
okay,
1, 2, 3, 4 flat.
Yeah.
Flight control in there, and to power the plane, I just plugged the battery up there to charge it. I've got the balance port built into the side of the plane.
Yeah, very nice.
It's a twin motor. It's brilliant. Absolutely one of my go-tos, to be fair.
Yeah, actually, that plane is. We had someone at the field who built one of those planes, and it was just a line of sight plane, but it was set up. He set it up with twin motors and took it out. Maiden flight, it flew perfectly. I mean, and everyone at the field was like, "Wow, this is such a cool plane! I want one of these now too." So it's what are those things? Are like $10 to buy the plane, the foam?
$7.99. So yeah, about $10.
Yeah,
they come out. Yeah, at the end of May. So a couple more weeks. They're back in the shelves for a week.
Yeah, the main thing is just getting them when they actually come in stock. It's I think I've had 3 or 4 of them. Yeah, I've got one of them.
So that's
a great plane.
And then you mentioned also, so you went through the whole AR. It sounds like you started with the AR Pro, then you went back to the Mini, and then the 900.
Oh, the 900, then the Mini. I've actually built the 900 for someone, but on the Maiden, I flew it all, got it all set up for him because it was his first INAV plane. I actually fell in love with the way it flew, so yeah, it's definitely on the list for another one.
Oh yeah, God, that is. That's one of those planes that you can crash over and over again if you. Well, I mean, not like you're looking forward to crashing the plane, but I've had those things come apart in pieces, and you can like, okay, the plane's gone when you're walking up to it, and then you start looking at it and like, there's a chunk over here, there's a chunk over here. I can glue this back together, and then the next day it's up flying again.
Yeah.
So it's just really.
Keep it light. Flies brilliant.
And it flies brilliant. Yeah, you're absolutely right. I was just flying one this morning.
Yeah, and if it's completely total, then just order a new one, because the kit nowadays is pretty cheap. I mean, considering the current shipping costs from China and all the prices went up, I think it's still around $50 or $60 or so for the kit. 55,
yeah, actually,
roundabout.
It's about $59 here in the States, and they Get FPV has them in stock. So the classic, they have the AR Classic now, which has. Yeah. That comes together in pieces, right? So that when you buy it, you actually have to end up gluing a lot more stuff than if you were to buy the actual kit itself. But you also have the opportunity to really get in there and really set it up the way you want it to be. So what do you think, Mark? Is it worth the extra effort to set up the Classic?
I mean, the Classic is still a nice plane. I still have one here. And Darren just made a controversial statement in the chat. The AR Ring is better than the AR Ring Pro. I mean, it depends what you want to do. Of course, for smashing around and beating the ass out of it, then yeah, the AR 900 is the better option for sure.
It definitely depends what you want to do with it, but I haven't built mine yet, but I'm pretty certain the AR Wing couldn't do what the AR Wing Pro is going to do for my application. You know, just have a massive bay in the middle where you can put whatever you want and still fly for a couple hours.
Yeah, if you go for long range and endurance, then the AR Pro will double everything the AR 900 can do, and just with 10 centimeters more wingspan. I just got a new kit for the AR Pro from Banggood. They had them in stock from the Czech storage, and yeah, it was here 2 days later. So that's waiting in my bedroom right now to be assembled, because my old one here, that's one of the pre-sales units that was not perfect even for building, and you can see the bottom is pretty scuffed all over the place. There are some damages, scratches from hard landings, and even a big crash.
I sold my first AR Pro and I ended up having another one off my friend, so I'm on my second one. First one's still flying.
Yeah, why not? I mean, it's the same like the AR Classic. If it crashes, if something breaks, you just glue it together and it goes again. So I will just make mine nice again, just with a complete new airframe, everything cleanly rebuilt. And the old airframe will go to Henrik because he wants to try a few things with that one. So he wants to start his integrated linkages or hidden linkage project with that one again.
So if Henrik had his way, everything would have hidden linkages. He'd remake every plane.
Absolutely, yeah.
So what do you think? Would you laminate that plane since it got all scruffed up?
I thought about it. Maybe it makes sense this time because I have a new kit. I have very expensive laminate foil actually here. It's Easy Coat from Aura Cover. This 10 meter by 2 meter roll cost me 117 euros with shipping. So It's really, really expensive stuff. But I had a little bit of bad luck on the foam of the clouds. I initially planned to use it on the clouds first, but it didn't stick there at all. And when I make it hot enough that it slightly sticks, then the whole foam bubbles under the iron. So yeah, I will try to use that foil on the new AR Pro, at least on the wings and the fuselage underside, not completely. Because the upper side with all the curves, it's not worth the effort in my opinion. But yeah, I will see how it goes.
If you have a problem laminating it, you might want to try. I don't know if you get 3M Super 77 over there in Germany.
This spray glue?
It's a spray, yeah. It's called 3M Super 77. You spray it on, and then you let it dry for about half an hour, and that gives a lot of tack, so you can actually use it for lamination.
Okay, I can try it. Yeah.
I think the common one in Europe is 3M90. that everyone seems to be using.
Yeah, that's another one that's tends to,
Yeah.
It's
It's like carpet glue, really.
JD in the chat, automotive vinyl for the clouds works well. Yes, automotive vinyl is nice. I also have a roll of carbon vinyl for cars, but this stuff is just too heavy. The clouds is already at 4.2 or 4.3 kilograms right now, and it will be even heavier when all my equipment is installed. So no, I won't use vinyl cover for that one. That will add another 200, 300, 400 grams for the whole plane. That's just too much.
Oh my gosh, that's insane. What do you think, Luke? What do you think about as far as what kind of covering do you like to put on planes, or do you put covering on planes?
I've kept quiet for a reason. I don't do covering on planes. Not to say that I would never, but I certainly don't have many planes that are covered at the moment. And all the ones that are covered using packing tape, fiberglass reinforced packing tape. And that's not a very permanent solution. It either dries out or it goes gooey. So either way, within 6 months, you're going to have to replace it. So that's normally just for like combat planes where, I know they're going to take a load of beating and then they're going to be, within 6 months, they're going to be destroyed anyway. For that, packing tape's really good. I as far as I've found, it's strongest of all of them, normal laminating or recover or whatever. But yeah, not suitable for your typical INAV plane.
Okay, so yeah, your adhesive is.
We can't hear you, Mark.
Yeah, I told that in the past already. About 2 years ago or so, I got a AR900 airframe gifted for free, and it was basically laminated with gaffer tape, 2 complete layers. So yeah. After I removed everything, I put it on a scale and I removed the weight of a full 2600 milliamp LiPo just by removing the gaffer tape. Just the tape, was as heavy as the whole battery.
Yeah.
Okay, so when it comes to these tapes, when you're talking about gaffer's tape, that's what they use in the motion picture industry for putting down wires on the ground. So you're running cables on the ground, you put gaffer tape over it because you can pull it off easy. So it's
no, you know it as duct tape.
Oh, duct tape.
Basically,
okay,
it was duct tape laminated, yeah.
Yeah, duct tapes for the ducts in your ceilings. Yeah, okay, so that's a natural rubber adhesive that tends to be stronger. Yeah. That was probably hard to get off.
It took me some time, yeah.
Yeah, and what I think Luke's talking about is some of that stuff is coming out of China, and there might be acrylic.
This is what I'm on about. I'm on about the 3M. I can't remember.
Okay, that's a hot melt adhesive. So yeah, and that's delaminating after 6 months.
Not delaminating. Normally, it either goes gooey, so where the adhesive, maybe because it's been the sun exposed to UV or whatever. But I normally find within 6 months, a year, it'll either go gooey. So
dry out.
Or it'll dry out and it'll flakes away. And I can't tell why sometimes it goes one way and why sometimes it goes the other. But it always seems to do one or the other within an amount of time. Yeah, exactly the stuff.
It's okay.
We can't hear you again, Mark.
I should unmute. So yeah, that's the same stuff with the fiberglass mesh inside.
Yes.
What I like to use it for is to protect the leading edges of my wings, because it will make them really resistant for small twigs or branches, and then do another cover with some laminate foil or so over it, and it makes really, really strong leading edges on the wings. Or just use it for covering up like cable channels or so on the planes. That's really nice.
I use it a lot for covering up cable channels and that kind of thing. Considering I end up replacing it quite frequently, I really use it a lot more than I should. I think, most of my planes have it on. You can probably see it on the Mini AR wing by the motor. This plane's covered in it.
You're outside it's outside the shot, I believe.
Yeah, that there, but yeah, works well.
JD in the chat just says that 3M packaging tape is eating alive by UV. Yes, that's absolutely true, and that's the reason. That's the reason why I only use it for edge protection and why I then cover it again with another kind of tape or lamination foil or whatever. For example, on my high-speed AR ring here, I just have it here next to me. I also have the same 3M tape under here. Maybe you can see it a little bit here, the seam.
Yes.
In the reflection. So I have the same tape under here, and then just put a stripe of Aura stick over it so it doesn't get exposed directly to sunlight. And yeah, that works pretty well. It never got burned off.
If anyone can recommend a packing tape, fiber reinforced packing tape that doesn't dry out, I will happily buy as many rolls as I need to try until I find one that doesn't dry out or go gooey with UV light.
You have to find one that's made of natural rubber.
It's adhesive, isn't it, really?
What's that, Lloyd?
It just needs a UV resistant adhesive.
Yeah.
It goes yellow with the sun, yeah. With my SAS Wild thing, the whole wing and the fuselage was completely covered in that, but then it was covered in coloured packing tape. It's been out for 3 years. I peeled it off the other month, and it's still up brand new.
So what tape were you using on that? It was
the fiberglass woven tape.
But it had something on top of it.
Yeah, and then on top of that there was coloured packing tape.
Yeah.
It's not brand new underneath still, 3 years on.
You might want to look into, the color tapes that they used to use on the Zaggies. So
I have all of the. Who is it that makes them? The JR coloured tapes. The only problem is it almost seems like too much for a big decision deciding what colour to put on the plane, so I never do it.
That's acrylic adhesive on that, so you might want to try that. It's a different kind of adhesive than the hot melt you're using. So that supposedly has better long-term characteristics.
That's Luke. That's exactly my problem. Why I really avoid like getting colored lamination or paint my planes, because I tried it one time on the Rafax and it looks like shit.
Exactly.
I really hate it.
All of the planes I've done colors on. I don't think I've really got any here. Just because they really do all look terrible. I end up doing just like block colors, and I'm just not that kind of artistic person.
Yeah,
so
absolutely.
I just keep it simple, keep it functional. I guess I could just get black and put black over all of the packing tape or something.
I mean, this thing also is very simple. Just one side is red, the other side is green, because I wanted to fly that one, or I did fly that sometimes line of sight, just to don't lose the orientation. It's the only reason. And on the AR Pro, the only reason why I have put the original stickers on there back then was because it was a review sample, and of course I wanted to show the plane how it's supposed to be made by the manufacturer. But all the other planes I have, they are basically naked. So,
So Lloyd, now you are working on something. This is a top secret project, right?
Which one?
Got to talk about it.
The altitude, yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, we can talk about it a bit, yeah.
Okay. This is interesting.
We're just going to go for a legitimate Guinness World Record altitude attempt. I'd say something I've always wanted to do, really.
So what kind of plane are you going to do it with, and how high you want to go?
We have got an X-mapping plane who've been giving us. It's probably about 18 grand, brand new with all the ground station and whatnot.
Wow.
But we ain't going to be using that. We'll be using its launch rail, but it'll be INAV. Obviously, we'll have to go INAV with it. I'll be doing it with a friend, Jim Dyke. You've probably heard him on here, seen him on here.
Jim Dyke, yeah.
Yeah. I got him into INAV, to be fair, and he's gone all the way with it. He's absolutely loving it. He's building a plane every month, probably more than that.
Yeah, with the new, we were talking about the new filtering that from Facebook. We've actually had one of our administrators get a timeout from Facebook. We won't mention names, but so Jim writes in. He said, "My name is considered a hate crime," or something like that.
Yeah, I was trying to tag him in something the other day, and Facebook kept denying it and just saying, "Yeah." Unbelievable.
Yeah, I know, it's crazy. So you're giving a plane 18 grand. What kind of plane is this thing? Can you tell us?
It's a glider. So it's full carbon Kevlar, 1.8 meter wingspan glider.
Okay, so it's one of those. I think I've seen these before. They're kind of really. It's a very thin profile.
Yeah, it's super sleek, but the battery, it's a 4S LiPo pack, about 8.5 milliamps, but it's laid out cell, and it goes in the wings.
Oh, okay.
So we've got the whole fuselage to either add more battery if we need be, or keep it light and just get the electronics in there, then flight controller and whatnot.
You say you've got 8.5 amp hour cells. Are these round cells, 18650s, or are
No,
they?
it's flat. It's a LiPo pack, but the cells are arranged end to
Oh,
end.
yeah, you did say LiPo. Sorry.
Yeah. So it's like it looks almost like a V, a very shallow V. It's like,
Oh,
it's like that, and it matches the sweep of the wings, and it just fits inside the wings, almost like what you'd imagine where a spar would go.
Yeah, yeah.
So this is a flying wing. This does not have a tail.
Yeah, it's a proper glider.
Proper glider, okay.
Yeah. It's a proper plane. It's got a tail. I believe it's got flaps and everything. And we've got a launch rail for it. A bungee powered launch rail. That should be fun.
Sounds awesome. And so you and Jim Dyke are going to get this up in the air and take it out for... Now, what kind of flight controller? Because they were talking about INAV. Is it just something off the shelf from Maytech?
Yeah, probably something that we know is rock solid. Something like a 405 wing, or...
Are you going to be using what do you use? The glove heaters for keep the ward warm?
Yeah, we'll have to cross all them bridges when we come to it, but I'm sure we will figure it all out. Just got to keep the electrics into their operating temperature. Battery wouldn't be a problem. Obviously, it'll maintain its own temperature with the climb out, I'm sure.
And what's the altitude you're trying to reach right now?
We want to at least get 35,000 feet. That's our goal.
Wow. Oh my God. Because when you get to 35,000 feet, don't you get down to like negative 50 degrees Fahrenheit? Celsius?
Yeah, about minus 30, minus 40 degrees.
Wow. Jeez.
Celsius.
Yeah, that's the thing that people don't really realize. Once you start getting altitude like this, then all of a sudden things get very cold very quickly, and then the electronics don't work anymore. So you have to think of everything.
The plane will just freeze, wouldn't it? So you need to have a decent day. Everything's got to be right for it. So.
Yeah.
Yeah, I also think the biggest issue are the servos, the mechanics. I remember when I was in Austria and we are flying in the mountains up to like 4,000 meters or so. In winter, in January, you really felt that the plane started to respond much slower because the servos go slow when the grease is getting stiff.
Yeah,
I really wonder that there was that video I think sometime early last year or so on YouTube, where really a guy flew like 12,000 meters unofficial with a mini Talon. How he really managed to keep that plane flying. I think he had multiple of these high altitude, or this person had multiple of these high altitude flights on his YouTube channel, and there was indeed one flight where he tried it the first time, or one of the first times, where at 8,000 or 9,000 meters his servo completely locked up. So the plane was uncontrollable and tumbling down, like he lost like 4,000 or 5,000 meters or so before it got warm enough to get the servos moving again. And then he was able to catch the plane and fly back home.
The good thing about that glider, all the servos are built inside the wings. They should stay pretty warm. They're all flexible control rods running to the surfaces. It's all factory built. So you can't even see none of the control linkages. They are completely hidden.
Henrik would love
it. Yeah, I would, yeah. I've some pictures up for him. It's brilliant.
That sounds cool, man. So, what kind of voltage? The thing I would worry about is you're saying you're getting up to 35,000 feet, so that's about it's about 5,800, let's say 6,000 feet per mile. A mile is about 6,000 feet, just a little bit under, so you're up about 5 or 6 miles in altitude, and so you're going to fly directly overhead. Sounds like, right?
Using an antenna tracker, we'll probably keep it 45 degrees out. So for 5-6 miles out, we'll be 5-6 miles up.
And so you're probably pushing out one of the higher output, like 2-watt VTXs?
Yeah, Rush Tank Solo possibly. Could even go 2.4 or 1.3, but we'll give it a shot with 5.8 first.
Sounds good. And then, Luke, what do you think about that? I mean, this is the kind of stuff Luke could get. He loves this kind of stuff, by the way.
What particular bit of it? I think it's a great idea. Love to be doing it officially. All sounds pretty plausible.
Yeah,
I love it.
What about 5.8 versus some of the other VTX range? 1.3.
I mean, obviously on the ground and everything, not with a plane, not with me flying it, but you can go 30 miles quite happily with 5.8, and that's enough to get up to, what would it be? A
little bit over 10 kilometers.
20 kilometers or so, I guess, to get up to 30,000 feet if you're going at a 45-degree angle. So that's very achievable with 5.8.
Yeah, totally. I also use the Rush Tank Solo in all my long-range crafts now, and I can easily do 30 kilometers just with the 150mm patch antenna and an old receiver that doesn't even have a high sensitivity. That's totally doable. And if you fly like in a 45-degree angle, I'm not sure if you try to go vertically up or if you go with some distance too. If you go like 45 degrees, 10 kilometer high, 10 kilometer away, you are at, 14 kilometer, 15, roundabout.
Direct line of sight. 20, but it's actually less than that, isn't it? It's 14 or whatever. So.
Yeah, so that's totally doable as long as the antenna has the right position on the plane.
Yeah, Rush Tank Solo's got to be my go-to VTX now.
Yeah.
By far. It used to be the 2HV, but
I haven't actually used the Rush Tank Solo. I typically use the Maytech Mini VTX, the one that does 800 milliwatts. So are they really that much better, the Rush Tank Solo?
Yeah,
can't fault them, to be fair.
Let's say it that way, the Rush Tank Solo has 4 power levels, and the last one is called Max.
2.4 watts with good cooling.
Yeah, so I've seen a few reviews too where they measured up to 2.2 or 2.4 watts of output power, but only for a short time, even with a fan on it. But if you go up to that altitude with minus 40, minus 50 degrees, this thing will blast at full power all the time. So you
got airflow and the wind chill to take in.
Yeah. The problem is, at higher altitude, you don't actually get better cooling than at lower altitude, because at the same rate at which your air gets cooler, it also gets thinner. So you get better cooling for, things that don't generate any heat. But for things that generate heat, you don't necessarily get better cooling. So it's not necessarily. You may still have to have a fan or something on it.
That's actually a good point. The question is only if the air is at the same rate colder, like the density is reduced, or
I believe they're exactly the same rate. But I may be wrong on that. I'm not a physics person really, so
I think you will see how it turns out. And
either way, I know that when I've done high altitude flying, I've actually had problems with ESCs overheating and stuff, because I've had there've been marginal ground level, and when you get higher up, the air gets thinner. Yeah.
But you all, on the ESCs, on the other hand, you also have to run the motors at higher RPM, so they have to work harder. You have more switching. Yeah. So yeah, we will see how it goes. We will follow for sure, and I hope you will post it in the group if you achieve your goal, or even if you don't.
I'll keep all the groups posted of our progress for sure.
Yeah.
Got a lot of bridges to cross and things to learn on the way, but I think it's fully achievable.
What I'm kind of curious about is, let's just say that, if you're using INAV, if you lose connectivity with your transmitter, then it's going to go into return to home. So you have to have your return to home, bring it back down probably, so you get all those settings done right. So, but what I wonder about, let's just say that the worst case scenario, the board freezes over and you have no board. Do you want a plane that just floats around because they can get caught up in the wind and then be miles and miles away, or do you want something that will come down?
One of them really, isn't it? Could be either way. Both probably sound good. But if you have a plane that comes down at that speed and that altitude, it's going to be coming down fast in that thin air.
Also, what are there's winds up there?
Yeah. Yeah, well, you'd have to pick a day in the year where everything's right, really.
Okay.
It's like high altitude, hot air ballooning. Everything's got to be right. You've possibly got 1 or 2 days a year in the UK where you've got it all there.
Yeah, there's like high altitude winds. Luke, do you know what altitude those are at?
Yeah, it depends on where you are and the day and everything.
By the way, Steve, you talked about return to home on INAV, but I really hope they have fixed the return to home altitude bug in the meantime, because there was a bug in the past in INAV, and I experienced it a few times. That if you have a specific return to home altitude and then a lower return to home final or loiter altitude set, and you come in with linear descent, for example, and you are way above your home altitude, then the plane will go into the loiter and firstly climb for no reason before it starts to descend. And the bigger the distance is between your home altitude and your actual arriving altitude, the higher the climb the plane is doing. And that bug was present in 2.4, in 2.5, 2.6, and 3.0, as far as I know. I hope they fix it in the meantime.
It sounds like what we're trying to do is get a certain glide slope set up. So if you're far away, it has to go up higher to get the glide slope.
No, that was really just a bug. So if you, let's say you have linear descending for return to home enabled, right. Like your return to home target altitude is, let's say, 100 meters. You are at 500 meters out and you have linear descent enabled. The plane will descend and hit the home point at 100 meter altitude. But if you are, like in this case, 10,000 meters high, and the descent rate is not high enough because you have a limited pitch down angle, and the plane will reach the home point at like 6 kilometers altitude, it will not start to loiter and descend, but it will start to climb instead at this point. When it arrives to home over the home point, and that was a bug. I hope it's fixed. Otherwise, you will definitely get problems if you are phase saving and the plane tries to come home and then climb to space. Just
make sure you don't set max to return to home.
We'll keep it out at a point where we could almost fly back at a decent angle of attack rather than nose down. Using the right equipment like the Pro 32 or Rush Tank Solo, there's no reason why we can't. If you maintain even 45 degrees, it's not too much, I suppose.
So what kind of transmitter and receiver are you using for this then?
Probably a Foxy Air Wildfire. That's what I use at the moment. So I use that on my goggles, and I will be using it on my tracker once I finish that, with a True RC Vulcan 18 dB patch.
Oh, that's for your VTX.
Yeah.
What about actual transmitter? So you're 900.
Probably a Pagoda 2, because I know they're tried and tested and they work great for me, or True RC Singularity.
I think Steve was asking, what are you using for your RC Link?
Oh, RC Link. Probably Crossfire. But at the moment I'm on R9, and it's all I've ever used RC Link wise for any FPV. I've never had the need to go to Crossfire yet. I like the 16 channels, and it just works for me, to be fair. It works.
Oh, yeah, God. That's what I use as well, R9s. Actually, the little... I was looking at the original R9 showed up. When you bought the R9 module, they had a R9 transmitter as well that they sold. Yeah. That had two antennas. It had two setups for two different 900 or 866 megahertz antennas on it.
The tandem.
It was tandem, and it was, so this is the original, probably back from 2000. When did this come out? About 2016, I think.
Yeah, 16, 17. But I'm still using an old ACCST module, flashed with Flex firmware. So.
Yeah, and what I was looking at was that this original module, they actually do have set it up so you can put access on it. I got a plane and I just switched it over to access. So they've constantly been updating their firmwares for all the different modules, and because that one is so old that people have kind of forgotten about it. but they still got it. And
so black module. Is that the black boxed module? Because I know the latest.
Yeah, it's a black box.
Yeah. That'd been about the very first.
What? So how far have you gotten out with? I mean, far away have you gotten with on the R9 modules?
27.2 kilometers, and my RSSI was still sat at 65, and it'd been like that from about 3k all the way up. Stable 65, 66.
Okay, and then are you pushing 1 watt at that point, or are you pushing out?
Yeah, 1 watt. Yeah, that'd be on. It'd probably peaked up to 1 watt, but I haven't got it on screen. I've got the Flex firmware, so it's adaptive.
Yeah, that's exactly. It's amazing stuff. And so, have you looked at? I mean, this is obviously probably, in theory, this would be the kind of thing that ELRS would be wonderful for, but you don't have enough channels for that probably to do this.
The bandwidth is a bit too small on the 868 as well, so you can have a lot more interference. The 2.4 is good though, but I've not really seen a need for it. Obviously, it's for quads really. I don't fly quad, so I've never really looked into it.
Interesting, fantastic. Cool. So, with that, which plane did you take out for 28 kilometers?
AR Pro.
Okay. Yeah. I think it really go.
It's got all my PBs, to be fair. That has all of my personal bests have been achieved with that plane. So it's flight time, distance, or altitude. No, other than that, sorry, that's my Goblin.
I was going to say, that'd be quite the feat if you got that with the AR Pro.
That's at 217 miles an hour now.
What was that with the Goblin?
Yeah, Goblin, yeah. It's technically the second fastest in the world. If you're going off their leaderboard, could be faster. If no one's bothered putting it on there, we'd never know. But on the manufacturer's leaderboard, I'm second.
What was Rupert's? Was it 250 or
256?
Yeah, that sounds good.
Yeah.
Jeez.
Moving.
What kind of motor did you have on there to get that speed?
He was using a boat motor, I believe, Leopard.
Yeah, one of the first 74s or
some beast. He had to cut the back end of the Goblin off and graft in the big, basically like a 90mm EDF motor.
So he was using a Leopard motor?
Yeah, the same motor I use on my Funjet. I can probably get it down. Well, yeah.
Oh God, yeah. Actually, I have one of those in a Radiant. Not that motor. But...
The turbine I'm planning on fitting in mine is the same weight as one of those Leopard motors, 350 grams.
Oh, really? That's not as big as I thought the turbine would be quite heavy then.
Yeah,
I've never really held a turbine before.
It's only a little motor, size of a can of Coke. So literally has the same dimensions as a can of Coke if you don't take into account the starter motor on the front and obviously your jet tube. And it kicks out about 3.5 kilo thrust.
These Leopard motors, I mean, I own one, but I've not really heard of them before. They just happened to fit in one of my planes. So, do these have a following? I don't know anything about the Leopard motor line.
They're really just good cheap motors, or not too expensive motors. You can see the back end of kind of sorta there in my Funjet.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
So you can get those kind of speeds, and they can run on 6S.
That one I'm running on 12S. So yeah, that one's running on 12S and pushing about 4.5 kilowatts, I think it was. This was quite a while ago now, but yeah, I think it's 4.5 kilowatts.
Jeez. It doesn't catch on fire.
That one hasn't yet. It still seems to be undone, but...
Fantastic, man. That's insane. So what do you think of the Leopard motors?
Me?
Lloyd.
Me?
Lloyd,
I've never used one personally yet, no. I've never used one.
Okay. And the motors that you use, of all the motors that you have, which ones do you tend to lean towards, and why?
Brother Hobby, to be fair. They're a bit cheaper than T-Motor, and they're just as good. They've got brilliant bearings in them. I've never had one go wrong. I've got a Brother Hobby on the Goblin. It's the same, 28, 10, 1500 kV. That's pushing just under 2 kilowatts through the 6S on a 6.5 by 6.5 APC pylon.
I wonder if Brother Hobby that's rebranded from T-Motor, like made in the same factory. Just a different brand.
Possibly, they're very similar.
Yeah, but I think they make their own motors. I think there's one motor. Was it the Brother Hobby Avenger or so, that has like a blue bell and a red bottom and then some stars on the side? Wasn't that also a Brother Hobby motor?
Yeah.
That's the one that Glenn or Bluefish uses on used on his AR900 or AR Pro. I'm not sure right now. I think on the AR Pro. And he runs it on 6S really over the specified limit, and he really pushes it, and that motor just goes and goes and goes. It's indestructible.
Yeah, when we come back after the break, which is coming up here in a few minutes, we'll be talking all about motors and kind of since I don't think our guest is showing up today, so we will be discussing all kinds of motors, having a free-for-all as far as that's concerned. And so Lloyd definitely has some opinions about motors and things he's looking forward to, and so we'll be getting more into that. So Lloyd, if you have, I mean, where you live, is it kind of windy, so you have to have heavier planes?
Yeah, it's pretty windy, but I'll fly in any wind, to be fair. Got to get used to it, so you can't be picky and choosy around in the UK. No. Other than the rain, yeah, I don't mind the wind. I do a lot of slope soaring, so I'm used to flying in the wind.
Yeah, we're pretty fortunate out here. We can pick and choose the days we want and low wind days. And so, what type of planes would you like to fly if the day's open to you? I mean, let's say
anything really, anything. As long as I'm flying something, I don't mind.
It sounded like you started off with gliders, then you went over to wings, and now you're kind of like, this high altitude, you're back to gliders again?
Yeah, well, it just seems like a good airframe to do it, because it's high lift, it's very efficient, and we can probably get all the gear in there more so than a wing. It just seems right.
Okay.
It's a super strong airframe as well, so it could take a pretty steep dive at some speed. It's full carbon Kevlar composite.
Fantastic. Yeah, have you seen the Excalibur from Hobby King?
Yes.
So they have
seen that. It's like a Delta Wing pointer.
It has a V-tail, and it's kind of it's a combination of a glider with a V-tail on it, and so
I've seen that. Yeah,
it's a cool looking plane. Definitely, that's one for a high speed as well. And you also mentioned you had the Dragon 1, and that was originally just a twin motor. It was like 1.4 meter.
Still got it. Yeah, it's my winter plane. That I rebuild it every year for winter, because you can literally fly it in a hurricane and it's dead stable. It's a brilliant airframe, absolutely brilliant.
Huh. So what do you think about the newest version of that plane, the V2?
I've not flew or seen one yet. I know John Pickles has got one. He's meaning to finish. So it does look pretty interesting with a tail. The only trouble with a Dragon V1 is the nose down on launch. But if you're going to give it a high enough throw, it's not too much of an issue. But they do like to pitch down quite a lot when you throw it.
Oh yeah, I can imagine so. And so you say it's a winter plane. This thing must be loaded up with all kinds of batteries to keep a...
Nah, to be fair, usually a 5,000 5S LiPo.
Okay, that's pretty manageable size.
Yeah. Battery bay is pretty small in the V1. It's not very wide and it's not very tall, so you're quite restricted.
Interesting. Yeah, I like that plane. And then what kind of flight times are you getting out of that?
Well, it's super efficient. I'm using 2604 1650 kV motors on it with a 6-inch tri-blade props, and it's pulling 25 amps full throttle. It'll cruise around at about 4 amps. Being a twin, it's superb.
Oh, crazy. That sounds really nice.
Probably mixed flying, easy half hour. If I went just for a super cruise on it, which I've never done, I could probably do an hour.
Yeah. The one plane that's actually pretty efficient, I was really surprised at, is the Rangers 1600, the Volantics.
Yeah.
And that one...
Got a 100, got the bigger boy.
You have the 2000 of that?
That one, yeah, 2.4 meter, that one is.
Oh, yeah. It's insane. And you also said you had the Phoenix as well, right?
Yeah, I used to. I sold it to a friend because I tried getting INAV on a glider, but I just found it too slow. So I sold it. Jim's actually got that. It's a brilliant plane, to be fair. I think he's had it 92 mile an hour out of it. Not bad for a 2 meter glider, is it?
Oh yeah, those are really. So the Volantics, that the 1.6 meter, they put the cheapest hardware they can possibly find in there. So if you ever
bin servos straight away. Bin them, don't even save them for anything.
Yeah, the whole thing. I mean, literally, the first thing I did was take it and rip out all the electronics. I think I saved one connector out of everything. And everything else, I was just the motor, everything, got rid of it. But put in that one, a Sunny Sky X2212, 1400 kV with an 8x4 prop. That's kind of like the old standard go-to. And I'm getting like, I think I flew it on a 3S 3300 milliamp battery, and after about 40 minutes, I was like, I got to land this thing. I'm just getting too tired of flying this thing around. That is an absolutely efficient plane, an unbelievably good plane. So, you said you have the 2.4 meter version of that, so you have it's the Ranger with the pusher prop on it.
Yeah. Obviously, you're quite restricted on the prop size on those, though. 10 inches is the biggest you can go on it. So you have to go for a decent setup.
That's right. I think you were sending me that video. You're flying down a waterfall or something like that.
That was with the Dragon. That was the Dragon V1. That was over in Wales last winter. Well, winter just gone. It was a super windy day. I had the AR Mini up, and it was like being in a washing machine. So there's no way I was flying the AR Mini under the bridge. I got the Dragon up, and I was like 50 mile an hour gusts, not a problem. Still went under it.
God.
Probably had about 6 foot of clearance between the water below me and the bridge above me. Ended up going into a tree branch, coming out the climb up out the bridge, but I just pushed through it. Yeah, quite a fun day, that.
That sounds cool. I'll tell you what, we're going to wrap it up right now. We're going to take about a 3-minute break, and then we'll be right back after that. And for our second hour, please stay with us. Hey, welcome back to Wing Talk, and this is the second half. We're going to talk about motors now in general, so I'm going to be pulling Luke a little bit more into the conversation here. One of the questions I have is, when it comes to the group, we did a survey of the group to see what we're flying. Now, there seems to be kind of a breakdown between motors that are, or planes that are about above 1 meter and planes that are below 1 meter. And by far, the more planes in the group tend to be below 1 meter in size. When you think about what's popular, and then there are some big ones like the Mini Drak and things like that, the Bixlers and things like that. So there's a lot of emphasis, I'd say, on smaller planes, and a lot of these are probably quad motors that would probably be used. Like, for example, a lot of twin motors tend to be pretty popular right now, especially on smaller airframes. So what do you think as far as what's a kind of an ideal setup as far as quad motors are concerned? Or a guy who, we got people coming in who may be familiar with RC planes in general, and when they start to deal with quad motors, these things are kind of a whole new beast for them.
Well, so what's a good quad motor to get started with on a
right?
I mean, I guess it depends loads on what plane it is, how many motors it has, and all that kind of thing. But you know, iFlight make good motors, T-Motor make good motors, Brother Hobby make good motors. What's the other one? The one that you like, Mark? The Airbee or the Air A, the T-Motor Racer Star crossover motor.
Yeah, it's at least for performance setups. The Airbee makes makes a good motor for fixed wings. Although it's actually a quad motor for like 10-inch quads or so.
Do they still make that? I thought you said they're discontinued.
Yeah, unfortunately, they are discontinued. I had the chance to get a bunch for a good price. I think a set of 4 motors, but 2 of them have bent belts. So I'm now trying to get some belts only. Maybe someone has a burned up one or so to get a full set for a quad project in the future. But yeah, it's really a bummer that they don't make them anymore. Great motors, great quality.
I didn't realize they were discontinued. See.
Yeah, over a year ago already.
Oh, I see.
Yeah.
So when I was looking at the sizes, and these motor numbering systems tend to be kind of confusing. Yeah, and the smaller ones, they all tend to be 2204, 2205, 2206. There's 22.7.5. What does the 22 must be the size of the bell, the diameter of the bell?
So the 22 is the diameter of the stator, and the 457, the second number, is the height of the stator. And what affects your power is the volume of the stator. So yeah, more volume, more power. And of course, if you go up 1 millimeter in stator, that's a bigger change than going up 1 millimeter in stator height. That's a bigger change than going up 1 millimeter in stator diameter. So, you know, 2207 will be more. Sorry?
There's a big confusion between plane motors and quad motors, because the fixed wing general plane motors, they're measured by the external motor diameters, bell diameters. Yeah. So it sort of throws you.
Well, even more than that, some plane motors are measured by stator size, and some plane motors are measured by outer diameter size. So with plane motors, you really have no way of knowing, other than, you know, if you know the power output, and you know which set of numbers it is, then you can roughly work out, oh, well, it must be the stator numbers, because if it was the external numbers, it would be a much smaller motor, and if it, you know, the other way around.
There are some motors like from Hobby King where they say like 32 to 30 or so this size, but at the end it's the 2216. You think you get a really big beefy motor, and then it's such a small small one.
The 2826 motors, that's what is it, 2216? It must be something like that.
It is a 2216.
Yeah, I also have one of these weird motors here. I think that was on a Mini Talon before. I just have to look where it is so I can show it. But sometimes that's really confusing, because they don't have really established a standard to name the motor sizes.
So the difference between a 2204 and a 2205 is the 5 is 1 millimeter. It's longer than the 2204 as far as the going from the shaft.
It's higher, so it's longer along the axis of the shaft.
Right.
Yeah. And that's a stator, not the external dimensions. Obviously, the external dimensions can be whatever, and it doesn't really affect performance in any meaningful way, other than, may make the motor a bit heavier or something.
Yeah, I kind of noticed like 2204s were kind of like the cat's meow maybe back in 2018. And then they all of a sudden, like 2019, it was kind of like 2205s. No one uses 2204s anymore.
Well, I think it was probably even a bit earlier than that. I think it was maybe 2204s like 2016, 17.
Okay.
2205s, 18, 19, and now everyone's on 2207s or 2306s in the quad world.
So guys, this is from XUAV 3536, for example, but in reality it's a 2814.
Huh. Interesting.
It's exactly the same size like the Sunny Sky 2814 motors. So
you were mentioning
that's not inaccurate marketing. It's just measuring a different dimension. An equally valid dimension in many ways. Because if you're bothered from a mechanical point of view, will it fit in your plane nicely? Then that's maybe more important.
So you said that. Go ahead.
Yes, that's even funnier with the Graupner motors, because Graupner uses the same method, and when you have such a small thing here and it's written as 2812, it's like the size of a quad motor. I think it's don't know 2220 maybe, or 2210. So this is even more confusing because it's 28. I think is the outer diameter, but 12 is the stator height. So they even mix bell size and stator size with each other.
So you mentioned the 22s, they went to 23s, so that means that the stator diameter was 1 millimeter wider than it was before?
Yeah, I mean, certainly I don't keep up with the racing quad world very much, but it seemed like, the last 2 years, maybe even 3 years, they've all gone to 2207s or 2306s, or even 2306.5s. I know certainly they've even seen some 2208s. All I really look at it from is what can I get for planes from the quad world. So I don't really keep up with the latest trends, just what's useful for planes. However, most of the planes I build actually have 2205 motors, just because I have loads of Emax red bottom motors.
Yes.
I have like I actually don't know. It must be I have 25 or so of them, so I just keep dwindling down that stock of motors, at least for all of my unimportant planes where I'm not bothered about pushing some sort of milestone or some high speed.
The Emax red bottom motors were actually the first motors I bought for my first 4S quad back in the days, and they are pretty sturdy. They can take a beat.
Yeah, I think I bought 2 sets. I bought one set for a quad and another set just for planes. And then about 2 or 3 years ago, someone was selling a bunch of them for like 20 quid. It may have been 30 for 20 quid. Ridiculous. Locally, so yeah, I just bought those and I've been working my way through them. So.
What really bothers me most between quad and plane motors is often and especially because people use that and say quad motors are better in performance because they are lighter and more powerful for the weight or for the size, but actually quad motors, when they say they can run on like 4S with 5-inch props or with 6-inch or 7-inch props, they can only handle that prop with full throttle for a few seconds. Like you use them on a quad, you cannot go full throttle on a even let's say a 2750 kV quad motor on 4S with a 5x4-inch prop on a ring. You go full throttle, at latest after 30 seconds that motor smokes and is dead. It's impossible to handle the power continuously. But the plane motors, if you go through the specifications there, especially for Sunny Sky T motor, they are very, very good in giving your data sheets and telling you what the performance is. If they say they can handle 3 minutes full throttle at 40 amps, for example, then you know the motor can handle that with the given props. So that's also a reason why I prefer plain motors, actually, with closed casing, with a big base for heat dissipation. I mean, for this one, for example, the first thing that heats up are the coils. And the second one is the magnets, the bell on the outside. The bell will be the same. It will heat up on a wing motor and on a quad motor the same. But if the coils heat up, there is nothing here. Wait, can I see that? There's nothing here to dissipate any heat. And then if you take the plane motors on the other hand, you have the whole motor base here with the air intakes or outtakes. That whole base here is like a heatsink, just to dissipate the heat from the coils.
Interesting. So you've got well, the reason I bring up the quad motors is because what I've started to notice is, like, when we look at in the group, what I see people get excited about. At one point, people were excited about the AR Pro when it first came out, and then I think it was the Dragon V2 people got excited about. I'm talking about just large planes. And then there's one of the there was another twin motor plane. There's been a couple of twin motor planes like the Alpha Bird and things like that, which have been over 1 meter. But for the most part, what people get really excited about are the Heat Wing and Rangers and smaller planes like that. So when you get into these smaller planes, then all of a sudden you're getting into the quad motors because they really can't handle the I mean, and for me, that's what I see people looking at, as far as, in the group, what people get excited about, what they discuss. So then all of a sudden, people want efficiency. They want to be able to get the most out of these motors. And all of a sudden, they want to know the difference between a 2204, 2205, and then why should I get to a 23 motor and things like that. So, look, almost.
Oh, were you asking a question? Or I thought.
What people tend to get excited about, what Mark was just mentioning, was that people in the group tend to, the plane of the moment tends to be quite a bit something, usually twin motor planes under 1 meter. So it was the Ranger, the Heat Wing Ranger, and now Finwing has their own version of it as well, another small twin wing motor.
Yeah, the problem is it depends a bit more than just the size and how many most the plane has. It's about the speed range you want to fly in, how many cells you want the battery to have, what props you want to use. You may be limited on how big the prop can be if you've only got a certain prop cut out behind the wing or to the fuselage. It's not just so easy as saying there's one good motor to use,
and that's another thing to bring up as far as what kind of batteries they use. It seems like when I look in the quad world, there tend to be minimum 4S, mostly 6S when they're flying their quads now.
Again, I don't really keep up with quads much. I know that certainly outside of mini quad racing or freestyle, whatever, it's still a pretty big mix of everything is used. Phantom 4 still flies on a 4S LiPo, a DJI Mini 2 still flies on a 2S lithium ion. But yeah, certainly the racing world and the freestyle world has all gone to 6S, it seems.
So, but with those motors, when the racing quad motors, I would imagine those tend to be kind of really set up for being able to be completely run at full blast for 2 minutes so they can do a race, go through all the obstacles within 2 minutes and be done first. And that's when they're pushing. These are people, the quad guys I talk to say they full throttle and go. It's kind of like their whole thing. Mark's saying that they're not really designed to be. They can get maximum output for not very long, and they get too hot, and then they.
Well, it's not a case that they can't do maximum output. It's they can't do the maximum output they maybe claim that they can do in the marketing material. If you want to go for the maximum output that they can in the marketing material, they can only do it for 10 seconds. In a lot of cases, that is true. But that doesn't mean that, in general, a lot of quad motors aren't a lot more powerful than, a lot of plane motors. Certainly, my experience has been, even, when you take into account extended periods of full throttle, they still perform, on average, better than the average plane motor. But also, a racer, they'll be tuning, their propellers, their motors, whatever, their batteries all the time to get the so where they start with the motors being stone cold and they finish the race with them at just before they're about to burn out. And
I mean, I'm no quad racing expert by far not, but for example, on a race, when you just listen how it sounds, they are usually also running on average with 50 to 60% throttle. You barely have any full throttle runs on a long straight line, maybe a short punch out, but that's it. And I would bet, I'm not sure about that, but I would bet that the high-level racers on the Drone Racing League, for example, that they even change the props with different pitch values to keep the motor RPM high and get a specific target speed for the same throttle amount, just to make their drones more efficient. Because if they have higher throttle for a longer time, just with the same speed, they will use much power at the end, especially for acceleration. They can accelerate faster, and I would bet they even match the propeller pitch for the track, for example. It's like a Formula 1 car chasing the tires with different hardness depending on the track.
Yeah, I mean, if we're going for different disciplines, I used to do a lot of RC car racing, 1/10 scale rear-wheel drive off-road. And, we'd change the motors per race, we'd change the pinions, so, the gearing per race, all depending on, how long the race is, what track it's on. Yeah, it makes a big difference.
So...
just one more point, and you also can't forget that if you put a quad motor on a wing, the airflow comes from the wrong side, actually.
Yeah.
And that's a really, really big point, especially if the motor is completely in the air shadow like here. So the motor barely gets any cooling on the inside.
Interesting. Huh. That sounds like... So, Luke, you do a lot of work with... We can't talk about your work in particular, but we can talk about in general.
Yeah.
So you work with larger quads and octocopters and things like that. And so you probably work with things like sin lifters and that.
Not actually city lifters, but yeah, those kinds of frames, that sort of thing, yeah.
So, sorry, Lloyd, you were saying something?
I thought you said my name, but you said Luke. That's all. Sorry.
So yeah, the reason now the sin lifters, those are what I've been noticing is they have a lot of motors that are designed for sin lifters that are supposed to be kind of like have minimal vibration.
Maybe. Certainly nothing that I've used is designed for anything like that particularly. Maybe you're referring to like the outer motors where they have rubber vibration dampening or something inside. I've not done anything with those most, but I think that's quite a specific system that Outer, only use themselves. They design the motors, they use them on their drones that they sell ready to fly. Yeah.
Okay. So once again, I ask you this every couple of years, but Luke, what's your favorite motors?
It all depends on what the application is really. No.
So like one brand that's really. I used to like Hacker before, and the Hacker motors.
Yeah, so I wouldn't say that I'm particularly partial to Hacker motors, but they're some of the best motors. Yeah, they're a lot of the motors that we're talking about now with quads are approaching the efficiency of the really good old school names. Hacker. Can't even think of any of the other ones now. Have completely escaped my mind. But yeah.
Mark, what about yourself? What do you think? What's the brand that you tend to lean towards now that you've gotten to some like larger planes and some more exquisite builds?
For me and my use cases, it's usually Sunny Sky. I mean, they are not the most high performance motors. They just have, or most of their motors are just for decent range, decent efficiency. To me, they are the best overall package. I have a few planes like the Speed AR Wing with the F1507 T motor on it. I have the RB on the Speed AR 900, and I think there's one more plane that doesn't have Sunny Sky, but most of the others all use Sunny Sky motors, and I'm totally happy with them. I mean, the AR Pro alone might have done like 100 flight hours or so, or maybe 120 or even more. I'm not sure right now. I have to look into the stats. With an Sunny Sky 2216 Mark II. So the cheaper one already, and it still goes strong. There's no play in the bearings. It just works like on day one, even after some hard landings and even a crash. So yeah, Sunny Sky are mostly my go-to motors for planes.
Fantastic, yeah. And then I did ask Lloyd. Lloyd said your brother hobby, right? It tends to be.
Yeah, pretty much my go-to. If they've got the size and the KV they'll need, obviously depending on application, that will be my go-to. They're pretty easy to get hold of in the UK as well. Hobby RC, Unmanned Tech have a good range, so definitely my go-to. A little bit cheaper than T-Motor, but decent bearings, super smooth. Just good motors, to be fair.
So Mark, when it comes to T-motors, I've noticed that they actually went to a naming convention like the F60, F80s. I think there's even an F90.
Yeah, there is an F90. That's something that really annoys me because you never know how big they actually are. I think isn't even the F90 smaller actually than the F80. I'm not sure about that right now. Yeah, I think it's mostly for the quad motors, right? They also have wing motors. I have an AS2317, for example. There they use the normal naming for plane motors. I had that one on the Rafax, and I mean, the Rafax is a pretty big plane, so the 2317 was a small motor for it, but it handled it. But T-motors, or especially the T-motor wing motors, are pretty hard to get in Germany somehow. So the only really real place I can get them is also on AliExpress or some overseas. Yeah.
Can you not order them from 3DXR?
I'm not sure about that. I've not looked on their shop yet.
I see. I'm pretty sure 3DXR shipped to Europe, and they do all the T-motor wing motors as far as I'm aware.
Okay, yeah, I will have a look for sure when I need new motors. But yeah, right now, as I said, I have a few on my quads. I have T-motor on most of them. Let me check. Oh, okay, on half of them. So the freestylers, they have T-motor Pacer and T-motor Velox. I have a full set T-motor F60 Pro. I think Mark 4. Not sure about that. Full sets still laying around. So on quads, I'm pretty happy with them. They are also very sturdy. On rings, I only used 2 so far. So the small 1507 and the 2317.
I see.
Okay, so we'll wrap up the motors right now. Is there anything else you guys want to add to it?
No, I don't think so.
Not at the moment.
Okay. Before we get into, I wanted to get into INAV 5.0, but before we get into that, we should talk about a couple developments. I know when it comes to radios, Mark, you have the TX16S, and so they came out. Radio Master came out with a couple different versions of that radio. They have the Josh Bardwell version, and then for a lot more money, there's the Max version of the TX16S.
Are you speaking about the new one, the
right.
Mark II, or in general?
Mark II, yeah. It's pre-order right now.
Yeah, because the really expensive version of the Mark II is some special version that has the new the special CNC hard gimbals in there. The gimbals alone cost about 180 euros or so. So that's the expensive radio. I have the TX16S Max, and for the new radio, I have to say, yeah, I'm not sure why they call it a V2, because it's actually just a small upgrade of to fix some of the remaining flaws. And optimizing it a little bit, so it's not that of a big upgrade in my opinion. But there's this point or one point why I really love Radio Master so much. You can basically upgrade your old radio to the new one. I could just order the gimbals, the potties, and the sliders, for example, and the back casing, if I want, of the new radio, and just upgrade my old one for a lower price than buying a new one. Not sure if I will do that. Maybe I will get the sliders, because I really hate the TX16S original sliders on mine, because they have such a loose midpoint. But yeah, currently I still have a new casing laying around here. I have to install mine because mine is broken.
So why are these Hall gimbals so expensive? I mean, why are they so much more expensive than other Hall gimbals that they've sold in the past?
I think that has to do with the production, how they do it, because the old Hall gimbals... Let me get the radio 1 second.
Sure. Sorry to put you on the spot here, but that's kind of... it's interesting because this tends to be... The Radio Masters tend to be really the radio that people tend to go for in the quad world, and in the fixed wing world, we've kind of broken down between Radio Master and FR Sky, and my dog that barks.
Okay, so I have the radio here now. So on the original gimbals, and that's something I only know from some videos I've seen, like Joshua Bardwell showed that. If you push the gimbals down, now here I have the point where it stops, but then it still springs, as you can see, because it's everything plastic inside. And this range where it can actually spring back a little bit is still recognized by the Hall sensor internally. So if you do your calibration, for example, and you go too hard to the edges, you will lose the endpoints then for flying unless you really press hard, for example. And they also have changed some the Hall sensors itself. I think they are more precise ones that are, as far as I know, even how's it called? Temperature-based self calibrating. So if the temperature changes, they adapt to that change and don't drift away like these do, for example. So if I calibrate them at home, then I go into the field and the radio is laying around outside at 0 degrees or so. Sometimes I have to recalibrate the radio to get the right center points again. And the new ones are complete or mostly out of metal, and it's machined metal, and machining metal is just expensive.
So Lloyd, what kind of radios do you work with? Your transmitter of choice?
I'm using a Grandaddy of a radio. It's a Taranis X9D. It's not even an Access, it's still ACCST. Yeah, it's a class little thing, to be fair.
Is it in the classics? Yeah, it's good stuff.
Yeah, classic. It's special editions. It's got some nice switches, Hall sensors, full effect.
Yeah, and then I have 2 of those radios. I've got the ACCST, and then I also have the Access. I love those radios. They tend to be my favorite.
Yeah, it's done me well. I've had that since I got into FPV, and I've just never needed to change it. It's been free me for the whole way.
Luke, what radio do you have?
I have the same. Taranis X9D Plus, still on ACCST. I've got an RFD 868 module in the back of it, hence why I've got, 3 of the antennas, obviously the Free Sky antenna, 2 868 antennas, and then a Spectrum antenna for running.
So do you have the modules built into that radio?
Yeah, I have it built in. underneath the back with a switch, so that I can switch between using this as the external module and the one built in as the external module.
So what you have on there is essentially you have the 866 and also 2.4.
I have 866 and 2 different 2.4s. Yeah.
God.
Yeah. So I still have loads of planes that run Spectrum. So.
One thing I want to add, I had the X9D before. It was actually a gift from a member of the community, like 2 years ago or so, from the UK. So he gifted it to me. It was one of the very first generation X9D, so not even a Plus, really the first one from 2016 or so. And these things are so damn sturdy. I mean, I have thrown it in my bag, I have dropped it on the floor. I did so much crap with that. The only thing I had was 2 switches, the long switches, the inner ones were bent when I got it already, and I think one of the switches broke off one time, but then you just get spare parts and everything is good. But it's so sturdy compared to the TX16S. You really have to handle that radio a little bit more carefully. Mine fell down one time, and basically on the inside of the front faceplate here, my camera is switched. On the front faceplate, there are screw holes, basically like stamps with holes in there where the screws go into to hold all the button boards. And there is, maybe you can see that. This button, for example, is now a little bit lower because just from dropping the radio, these holes broke. The roller was completely inside the radio on one side. And also the one side of the frame is closed, so it breaks internally. You don't see any damage on the outside, but internally it breaks really easily. That's one thing that's really annoying on the TX16S, in my opinion.
You say that the TX16S is fragile. Maybe I've abused mine too much, but I've also got a broken button on my one. At the moment, I have to fish in there with an Allen key to press the actual, internal button.
But I mean, these are also spare parts you can get separately. Just these plastic buttons.
Unfortunately not, in my case, because what I originally did to fix the problem was shove a load of super glue to hold the broken button in. So now I can't now put new buttons in it because the gap's all filled with super glue. I'm going to have to get a new front casing and replace the whole thing.
Yeah, but I mean, this is really a nice thing. For example, for my TX16, after a long time of working and getting more and more cracks in the casing, it's so easy just to get the spare parts, like the complete front, this is the back side, and somewhere here is also the mid frame and the display edge. So yeah, I just replace it and it will be like new.
So what happened to Jumper? Because that was kind of like the radio of the moment a couple of years ago, and then they're kind of gone now, or I don't hear people talking about them anymore.
No, Jumper is still in business. They have upgraded their main radio, basically the competitor to this one, a few times. I think they are not as big anymore as Radio Master is now. But they still bring, especially their FPV quad radios, their gamepad style radios, more and more new generations of them. There's the Jumper T Lite, then the T Pro or so, or how it is called, I'm not sure. But yeah, they are still doing stuff. They just don't seem to focus anymore on the full size radios.
Yeah, so these two guys looks like they're using ACCST. That means you've been having your radios around since about 2018. And so, Lloyd, have you ever had any reason to upgrade to Access or change your radio to Access radio?
No. When they switched to Access, I thought I was going to have to upgrade because it stopped making the ACCST receivers, but then they brought Flex firmware out for the new receivers, so I could just reflash it. Obviously, I had to reflash the radio, but it's a bit of a bonus because obviously it went from 500 milliwatt up to 1 watt, and it had the adaptive power, which you never had before. So you had to select, say, 500 milliwatts, and your battery wouldn't last that long in your radio. You'd say get 2 or 3 flights, and it could do a charge. And now, probably charge it once every 10, 12 flights.
And then the one thing I really like about the when you're dealing with the X9s, it has a monochrome screen on it, which you look at and you think, oh, this is not as good. I'd rather have a color screen. But the reality is like I can run my R9M module off the internal battery for about 4 or 5 hours. So it's kind of like the amount of power these things. I mean, if you're using just ACCST, just on 2.4 gigahertz. The one I used my old ACCST version of the radio of X9D, I charge that maybe once every month and a half. It's just you don't really charge it at all. Yeah. And then Luke, do you feel like you're going to ever upgrade to not upgrade, but get yourself over to the ACCST?
I have no idea, to be honest. I definitely would like to be.
I mean, access.
Yeah, I know what you meant. I definitely like to be on access. There's no reason not to, really, I don't think. I have a few receivers that wouldn't be compatible, just swap them over. The main thing is, this radio is currently completely full with models. I have all 60 models full. And I have another 20 on an SD card. All of those are planes that I've actually got that would need to be rebound, taken apart, put new receivers in, whatever it may be. And at the same time, about half of those have Spectrum receivers, and I'd probably want to switch them out of those over as well. It's just finding the time to do it at some point. And the expense, not fun. I may just. This particular RF board that's in the back of this Tyrannus is like gold dust to me.
Yeah, that's interesting because I know you showed us a picture of you flying a plane in 2008, and you said you were 8 years old at the time.
Yeah.
So was that Spectrum back in the day?
That would have been the picture that I probably would have shown you would have been flying on a cliff down in Cornwall, and that would have been with my Spectrum DX6i. So, yeah. Not actually the module that's in the back of this. The module that's in the back of this I took out of my Spectrum DX7S. But, yeah.
You put the transmit module out of your DX7. So you're flying Spectrum with your RTX.
Yeah, and it's an actual X9. Spectrum module. It's not, a knockoff module or a multi-protocol module. It's a real Spectrum module, which at the time was very important to me because I was flying, some pretty expensive planes on Spectrum still, and I wanted, a real module rather than some Orange RX module, which was at the time was all you could get. So.
Yeah, somehow at this in this case the inner monk kicks in because, for example, with the TX16 I usually use my R9, so I have my Moxon antenna mechanically mounted here. I can just unfold. The R9 is running on Axis since the mod is available for the radio, and I also have a few 2.4 gigahertz receivers. But of course the internal multi-module here cannot do access, and I also decided to not use the internal module at all for my fixed rings because I just don't trust it really. It's like,
yeah.
I mean, maybe it works totally fine with the ACCST, maybe there will be no problems, and there are regular updates, but at the end when I use my FR Sky X Lite Pro that has an official FR Sky module with official firmware inside that can do access, I will use that, of course, especially if I fly my planes. I just don't want to lose them.
That's the thing, particularly, some of my big 3D planes and that kind of thing. They're not, doing long ranges or anything, but I really can't be crashing them, because of a dropout or, some sort of bug or something. And so even Spectrum for that is, quite okay. Some people may disagree, but I've only actually recently had one problem with Spectrum, and that was on an old DSM-2 receiver, not a DSM-X receiver. So, yeah.
The problem I have with Spectrum is that there's no upgrade path for your older modules and things like that. There's no firmware flashing you can do.
What do you mean?
Well, the firmware for the receivers, like if you buy yourself a receiver from 2010 used, and they're all kind of like marked, so they could be whatever they are, AS3X. Well, not AS3X, but one of the. They all have numbers.
As long as you get a receiver that's DSMX, you can still use it.
Right, but
and a DSMX came about in 2011, I think, 2012. It must have been, quite early on.
Right, but since then, have they upgraded the firmware, and if so, why?
No, it's all the same.
But I have to say about all this firmware upgrade stuff. I mean, I know that like Crossfire users, for example, often said, yeah, Crossfire regularly updates their system, fixes bugs, and gives you features, and FrSky doesn't do. But I mean, take other companies, for example, take FlySky. I mean, just take the X6P receivers, for example. I used a bunch of them, FlySky receivers. They never got a firmware update, but you buy them, you bind them, they work. No problem whatsoever. So,
which is exactly how it works with Spectrum. There's never been a firmware update as far as I'm aware, but you can buy a receiver from 10 years ago or now, and they'll all work the same transmitter. They all just work, So
you don't have to update to get the firmware compatibility between your module and the receiver. You just bind them and they work. Of course, it's not ideal with FlySky, for example. They have now the I think with the AF-HDS2 radios, you could use AF-HDS and AF-HDS2 receivers, but with the AF-HDS 3 radios, you cannot use the old receivers anymore. That's the only downside, I have to say. I really don't like. Maybe they will update their module to support the old receivers again, or maybe they did. I'm not sure. I didn't follow that. But yeah, if it works, never touch a running system.
Right, don't fix it, as they say.
Yeah.
That was one of the advantages that FrSky had. Was one of the reasons they asked people to switch to ACC ST V2 is because the floor, especially in places like the UK, kind of got to be so crowded with at 2.4 gigahertz that they were having reception problems. So they had to kind of redo the firmware for a more crowded spectrum at 2.4 gigahertz. And Mark's not buying it.
So sorry, I don't really get what you wanted to say to me.
All right. So the reason why ACCST went to V2 is because, well, one of them was so that they could have locked down the link between the transmitter and receiver, so you can't use a 4-in-1 module. But the other reason is because they had problems, especially in places like the UK, where the 2.4 gigahertz range got so crowded with so much traffic in there that they're having connectivity problems show up. When they first came out in 2012, it wasn't an issue, but since there's so many more devices at 2.4 gigahertz, they had to kind of upgrade their standards.
I'm not sure exactly. I think we have to ask Darren for that next time.
Yeah, that's Darren here already explained that well. Yeah, that was one of the things he mentioned in the document that we put together, was that the floor, there was some changes.
Yeah. Because with the AF-HDS2 firmware, they have removed the D8 mode, but only on the receiver side, of course. So if the receiver is ACCST V2, then you don't have the D8 mode anymore. But you can still use an ACCST V2 radio module to run the ACCS2 V1 D8 receivers, of course. And I think for the 2.4 gigahertz noise around, I think it's mostly Axis that has upgraded their spectrum features and spread spectrum stuff and protocol and everything for better range and better noise noise cancellation, basically. I think it was mostly on Axis where this was optimized.
One of the things they're looking at doing is the new radio, the X20 from FrSky, has Ethos as far as the firmware that they're using. And what they're doing is there's going to be something similar to the simulator, or the OpenTX uses something to connect your PC to your radio. The companion, right? So they're having an Ethos companion that would do essentially the same thing, but if your transmitter and your receiver don't have matching firmwares, they will not be able to connect. So it'll suggest you upgrade the firmware of the receiver. And you can do that over the air with the new access. So that's one of the things that's kind of interesting about that. But I mean, Mark's talked about the flying with FlySky, and I remember when we first started the group, he was flying nothing but FlySky, and he was getting like 10 miles away on FlySky. The transmitter.
It wasn't 10 miles. I think my personal record with the FlySky i6 radio was 4 kilometers, 4.2 kilometers or so. I think that was my personal record.
That's still pretty good. 4 kilometers. That's, yeah.
With the FlySky radio, and I'm not sure what the receiver was. I think the receiver was an X6B at this point.
God, I swore you flew further. I remember you went to your parents' house.
It was when I got the X9D and the X8R receiver from FrSky. That was when I reached 11 kilometers on 2.4.
Okay.
Yeah.
Gotcha. Fantastic. All right, so we have a few minutes left. I wanted to get into INAV 5.0. I know Darren has wrote us some notes here as to what's new and different about INAV 5.0, or some things to look forward to. Mark has the list, and he's going to break it down for us.
Yes, so let me prepare here. So actually, Darren has prepared this list for us, so I can share that here. I think I should maybe just share the screen for everyone in the chat too.
Sure.
So here we go. First on Skype, and then I can go here. So yeah, Darren condensed a good list of features for INAV 5.0 that will come to us. So let's just quickly jump through it. Maybe if there's something from interest, maybe Darren, we can share the complete list later. But of course, we will talk about that in another Wing Talk short before release to make sure we have everything together. That's just the current state of the development. So there are a few fixes in the smart audio for the TBS69, for example. The ERC tramp support for the Maytag 1.3 GHz VTX is integrated, and an automatic D-Shot or an automatic protocol switch for ESCs that don't support D-Shot, because D-Shot is on by default. There are a few updates on the OSD side, like milliamp hours used can now work with batteries up to 10 amp hours actually, for milliamp hour range. Let's just talk about this stuff that's really of interest for us wing pilots. ESP32 radar now uses the correct units. There was some mismatch with the unit conversion, because you can switch between miles or imperial, metrical, and aeronautical units, and that was not used correctly for the ESP32 or INAV radar.
Interesting. So it would show. Yeah, we're having problems especially when it came to altitude, differences in altitude, that we were getting numbers, we had no idea what they were.
Yeah, exactly. And here we should now in 5.0 get the correct numbers. This is, by the way, a nice new addition made by Darren. You can enable switch indicators, or actually channel indicators on your OSD that tells you for your switches or for your channels in what position they are, or if they are high, mid, or low. This could be interesting to be used as like an landing gear indicator, if you have the landing gear up or landing gear down, or LEDs on or LEDs off, so you have a reminder in your OSD. That's a pretty neat feature.
Interesting.
What else? Some crossfire stuff. time to display system messages. So display messages or system messages, now we can change the time, how often they circle around, like the messages if you are in phase save, when it says phase save and then move sticks to take over control and then it switches back to phase save. We can now select it or change the time, how fast this is switching forth and back, to have time to actually read the message. A few bugs. This is mostly for quads at this point. A return to home issue. What else do we have here? Modes for multi-rotors no longer show up on fixed rings. That's for the configurator side, so we don't get confused with modes that we can't actually use on fixed rings.
Oh, that's great.
What else? That's mostly bug fixes. Advanced features, tuning and programming. Yeah, here's a nice thing. Allow the tuning of the TPA time constant in flight. That's for the throttle to pitch attenuation. Yeah, shut up. Where we can tune better, but I have to look into that in detail. I have not looked what it actually does. Logic conditions. Now we have, instead of 32 lines, we have now 64 lines. This is really helpful if we want to make multiple programs or more complex programs. Some might remember I recently made a variable geofence system in INAV where I can select the distance and altitude limits in 4 steps on my on the trim switches. This used all the 32 lines available and there was no room for anything else, and now we have more room to work on the programming side.
You skipped over a couple that look kind of interesting.
Sure.
So the fixed config change bug, that's a huge one right there.
Oh yeah. Sorry, I missed that. This is really interesting. A lot of us pilots might have recognized that sometimes it can happen that you power up your plane, you want to launch, and then in the system configure or in the system messages in your OSD, you see a message: invalid config LPF low pass filter something. And just a few months ago, I think in March or so, February or March, a user on GitHub found out how this bug actually happens, and it was a combination of a not very well done check on the INAV firmware side and an actual bug in the INAV configurator. So first we thought the configuration will change completely randomly without any reason, but actually what happens is that if you are in the configurator, you go to the CLI, then you disconnect, and at this point the flight controller is not rebooting. And if it's in this state, you try to reconnect with the configurator. The first time it will fail, then you replug the flight controller and then try to reconnect. This will cause a wrong protocol detection or protocol version detection that sets 3 values to wrong values in INAV temporarily. And if you then change any setting in INAV, doesn't matter what it is, and you click on save, these wrong values are also saved. And this is the actual config change bug caused by the configurator. And this will be finally fixed.
That's worth the money right there. Check that out. And then the other one that right below that is you can change the color of your LEDs. Looks like on a switch or a slider on your radio.
Yes, I have not looked into that yet, but I think that's mostly for, of course, for RGB LEDs. In the past, you can change the color, like for your throttle position or for your GPS status and all that stuff. Seems like we can now do that with the switch, of course. But I think we have not many people using actual RGB LEDs, right? I mean, I have not seen many planes in the group, at least, that use RGB LEDs.
I've got a few, but yeah.
Because I mean, this is the only one that I have with RGB in the back.
So yeah, there's that. But if you do have that, it's good to have. Sometimes people use that if you're following people, and you can change colors. Like if you're on a certain race team or something like that, with a switch you can change the colors right away. So it's interesting. But I like the flashbangs, the Mamba flashbangs. I know you'd like those as well.
Okay, what else do we have? So 64.
Oh, there's one other that it's not listed here, which is there's a fix, a repair to the. It's on the H743 V2. It displays. It never changes the current draw. So when you start a flight off and you have 4.2 volts per cell, by the time you end the flight, 20 minutes later, you still have 4.2 volts a cell, and then your motor uses absolutely no power the whole flight. So that was a bug that they fixed in INAV 5.0. Mark, you're not talking.
Yeah. Oh, so yeah, I didn't know about that. Good to know. Yeah. As I said, this list is not complete, of course. It's still in the current state of the active development from a few days ago. So anyway, thanks to Darren for looking over all of that. What else? You can set a target rate or angle on axis in programming. I guess that's something like making the putting the plane like in a constant climb angle, for example, for automatic climbing. Not sure about that. I have to look that up. The number of battery cells can be used in logic conditions. So, for example, if you put a 3S battery in, you can also change the pit profile, not only the battery profile, with logic conditions automatically, just to adapt for different speed ranges of your plane. That's a nice addition. Comparative operations, min max added to logic conditions. Not sure about that or how to use that. I have to look into it. Automated flight and waypoint missions. You can now force that the waypoint altitude is reached before the craft is allowed to continue to the next point. This is a nice thing. In the very past of INAV, this worked the way that the plane, for example, or also the copter, if you go from one waypoint at a low altitude and another one at the high altitude, the copter used the maximum climb rate that is set constantly to go to the altitude, and then if it reaches the altitude of the new waypoint, then it just continues in a straight line. This was changed, I think, in INAV 2.3 or 2.4, I'm not sure, that the plane or the copter can make a linear descent to the new waypoint. But then you have the problem that if the other waypoint is too high and the distance is too short, and for example a plane has to move continuously, cannot reach the altitude, it will still set the waypoint as valid although the altitude is not reached yet, and go on to the next one. And this new feature allows the plane to move to the new waypoint, and if the altitude is not reached, it will automatically loiter at that position and continue to climb to the waypoint, and only if the altitude is also reached, then it continues to the next one. This is a really nice thing for long-range missions, for example.
Sounds great.
So configurator, Bluetooth low energy, TCP and UDP connections method added. This is really interesting for the configurator, because now you can use like a SpeedyB adapter or the Bluetooth module from Flyroo, or any Bluetooth low energy module like an HM10 to connect wirelessly with your PC configurator to your plane. You don't have to add a USB cable anymore. Before that, the configurator had to use the cable, even if you have Bluetooth installed on the plane. So this is now integrated and needed some changes in the INAV firmware and also in the configurator, of course. I already tested it, and that works really great. Okay, sliders added to some settings. Yeah, I think that's more an optical thing. I have to check what settings exactly. Yeah, the font selection box has been moved so that the OSD preview can be seen with the new font. So if you want to upload new fonts, you have this overlay box now a little bit lower, so you can see in the background in the preview how the font actually looks like.
And that's a Rich Adams addition right there. He mentioned that to me, and I mentioned it to Darren, and thank you, Darren, for doing that.
Yeah, sounds great. The GPS configuration has moved to the GPS tab. That's really nice, much easier to find, especially for beginners, I guess. Yeah. Of course, it will be a change for current users. Auto launch idle throttle delay added to the advanced tuning page. Yep, that thing was missing. I think the idle throttle delay was added in 4.0, but it was not in the user interface. It had to be set with the CLI, but this is now in the tuning page. That's nice. Craft name is now on the OSD page. Totally makes sense, and has a variable length for precise positioning. This is nice because before the field for the name tag was always a fixed length and always left bound, so you had to move it around if you want to have your name like centered on the screen, for example. This is not the case anymore. You can now, no matter how long the name is, the field will be in the configurator the same length, so you can place it properly. Okay, there's a small update notification setting for the configurator. Parameter. Yeah, this is also nice. A lot of parameters, not only the battery settings, are tied to the battery profile. So if you change between battery profile 1, 2, 3, like you want to fly with a small 4S, a big 4S, or even a bigger 3S pack on the same plane, now there will be a colored background for behind every setting that will be stored in that battery profile. This, for example, includes the auto launch settings. For auto launch settings, you have idle throttle and launch throttle, and these will change if you change the battery profile.
Interesting.
And this is especially helpful if you have a plane where you switch between 3S and 4S, for example. You can have automatic battery profile selection. And this will automatically then adapt the auto launch settings to the battery you actually have installed. Of course, you have to set it for each battery one time, but makes especially launching easier. No, grumpy old note. I don't think that DMA was fully implemented in INAV yet. Buttons added to the CLI page for exit, save, and MSC. Yeah, okay, small addition. MSC is, by the way, the mass storage mode, so you can access your black box log files on the onboard flash or on the SD card through USB. So now we have a button, you don't have to type it. Mixers are now automatically applied with defaults. Not sure actually what this does.
Yeah, well, I think that's when you sign the defaults when you sign in and say that you're flying with a delta wing versus a standard wing. It will come up with the delta wing as in the mixer tab.
Yeah, makes sense, but I have to look how that exactly works, because we only have delta wing or tail wing or plane with tail, and plane with tail can be everything. That can be rudder only, that can be pitch only, or pitch with rudder, or V-tail. So not sure how that exactly works, so I have to look it up. Airplane mixer images are now dynamic and store the current output number. I think that's what Darren showed in the last Wing Talk also on the configurator. So on the small image in the mixer page on the upper right corner, it shows you the actual servo number on the image, so you know where to put every single servo based on that image. That's really helpful to not mix the wires up. Yeah, you have variable fields in the black box recorder, so you can disable like stick inputs, or you can disable the raw accelerometer data just to reduce the black box size and the data rate. What else? Copied target names now work on firmware flash search box. Not sure what that is. Multiple copies of hide DJI unused toggle switch stopped. Okay, that's a bug fix. Also some fixes, mixer enhancements. Yeah, the second motor removed from non-differential thrust mixers, added a V-tail mixer with differential thrust. New servo button now uses logical number, and also more mixer upgrades or mixer page upgrades at this point. The operations in logic conditions are now ordered and look neater. Yeah, makes the usage actually a little bit better. So yeah, for 5.0, it's not too much on the firmware side or for fixed wing side. A few new features. Most changes are in the configurator, and a lot of these changes are actually done from Darren. So this is a really fantastic job. Yeah,
he's put a lot of work in it, especially with being sick with COVID. He's had more time to be at home and work on this, so I really appreciate that as well.
Absolutely.
All right, let's jump out of this, and we're going to wrap it up here. So, opportunity to. I think you're still sharing the screen.
So yeah, all good. Stream is switched.
Oh, the stream is switched. Okay.
Yeah.
Cool. All right. Well, that I think wraps it up. Hey, Lloyd. I can't see him. Is he still here, Lloyd?
Yeah, I'm here. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you for joining us today, Luke. Are you still here? I think I see him too.
Yeah, I'm still here.
Okay. There we are. All right, guys. Well, I think that's going to be it for today. Thank you so much for joining us. Everybody, stay tuned for next month for another edition of Wing Talk. Bye, everybody.
Bye.
Yeah.
Right.